using marijuana quickly grew and grew and grew to the point of addiction. Now, at the time, I absolutely had no concept of that. And I think that insidiousness, coupled with specifically for marijuana, the perceived banality or the benign nature of the drug. And there's so many people out there to tell you that this is fine and who cares. But it never would have occurred to me 15 years ago or whatever to tell myself, hey, you're missing out on a third of your life.
Welcome, Jeremy, to the Inside Addiction podcast.
Thank you, Luke. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So why don't you start off, Jeremy, by just telling us a bit about your own story and your own kind of journey with addiction?
Yeah, so this is not something I talk about all that often. So it's fun. We get a little bit vulnerable. I remember when I was very young. I didn't really have a good place to fit in. Now, where was very young? Maybe middle school, 14, 15, 16, something like that. And, what were my hobbies? Computer programming and playing Warcraft 3. Those were the things I was really interested in. So like any good middle schooler, I said, well, how can I be cool? And I figured, well, maybe I can grow my hair out and profess a love of death metal. That's cool. That's definitely cool. Now, I have the hair now. It's come and gone a couple times throughout the whole journey. So that was a little bit cool, but it was a little bit pretending. I couldn't actually. I remember I was in Tampa, Florida. So Morbid Angel is a death metal band local to Tampa, Florida, and I made some friends, and we all listened to Morbid Angel. I challenge you, dear listener, to try to listen to Morbid Angel. It's easier said than done. It's really brutal. It's really tough. It's tough on the old ears. So anyway, I wanted to be cool. I wanted to make friends. I wanted to do something other than learn C++. And I did learn C++, and I use that for my career today, and that's great. But so past that, one goes through phases quite often, especially in adolescence when you're trying to figure these things out. Other interests I had were like classical philosophy. So that's an insane person hobby. Classical philosophy. And when I say classical, I'm talking like Aristotle, right? Very tedious. Also, Aristotle, not really, maybe a smart guy. I'm sure he was very pleasant to hang out with. I remember reading Metaphysics, and he's talking about how an arrow clearly pushes forward by pushing the ether around it in the front and pushing it in the back and doing some kind of. It was a little bit nuts. I'm thinking about these things at 13, 14. I was not about to get a girlfriend. And I'm thinking, what is possibly going to make me cool? Or what kind of social activity can I do with my peers? The kinds of peers I want to be around, the kinds that have girlfriends, the kinds that are not just programming and reading ancient Greek literature. And I stumbled across marijuana. I think at first I told myself, hey, this is dangerous. It's a dangerous thing. And I had reverence and respect. I remember I was reading various things about mystical experiences and the idea of using marijuana as like this mind altering drug as a gateway to the mystical experience, which I view it as a noble thing, the mystic experience. And I still do. Now, that said, despite my reverence, it quickly grew and grew and grew to the point of addiction. Now, at the time, I absolutely had no concept of that. And I think that insidiousness, coupled with specifically for marijuana, the perceived banality or the benign nature of the drug, most people, and now I'm in Boulder, Colorado, by the way. So I can't walk out my front door without stumbling over a pothead who thinks that it's totally cool and fine and as recreational as alcohol, etc. There's a good basis for all of this. It's not heroin or cocaine, and those are very real struggles for a lot of people. I don't even think it's comparable. But what happened to me, and this is my amazing summary here, is probably the next 10 years of my life. 10 years, I lost maybe a third of my economic productivity, which matters to me. I'm a business owner now. I care about my economic productivity actually directly affects my own income and my sense of fulfillment in life. So whether or not what the listener cares about that, it does matter to me. and really my memories. I think I probably slept another 3 hours every night. It parasitized my life and my experience. And on the other end of it, having abstained entirely from marijuana for 5, 6 years now, something like that. I don't know. It doesn't matter anyway. There we go. I'm too adult to remember my own biography. But having abstained for a long time, I have a fuller experience of life now. I'm more present. I'm more alert. I'm more awake. I'm capable of more profound mystic states, even using natural methods such as meditation and, in my case, extreme temperature change from saunas and and ice baths. Hopefully that's not scratching the same itch, but it never would have occurred to me. And I wish, it's such an awkward topic that I'm really grateful that you do this, Luke, but it never would have occurred to me when 15 years ago or whatever, to tell myself, hey, you're missing out on a third of your life. It's being taken from you every day by the very thing that you think liberates you and brings you pleasure. The thing that you think sets you apart from the mundane reality. But what you don't notice is the hangover. You don't notice the paying the piper. And it breaks my heart for past me. It breaks my heart to see other people doing the same kind of thing. And with marijuana specifically, because it is so insidious, I feel like people who are using fentanyl and heroin are pretty aware that this is a problem, and they do it anyway. Marijuana, I think, is often justified, and never do I get on the high horse and say, "Hey, you're burning your life away."
Yeah,
So I'm glad to be here, glad to share that story.
yeah.
Sorry for the
And
rambling portion of it, but
no, that makes perfect sense, Jeremy. And like you say, it's often justified, and we're often in this kind of like haze or fog where we're just like smoking, and we get quite indoctrinated into the smoking world and into the smoking weed. And like you say, for you, you lost a lot of your economic productivity, your memory. You're just kind of paralyzed and moving through life. At that time in your life when you were smoking, did you see any of that, or were you just kind of like in that fog?
I yeah, how did I break the cycle? I'm not sure. It's so I own a marketing agency. Now I've said something that effect for 15 years or more. But in the past, I was freelancing and maybe contracting out certain like website design. Now I have full-time staff. I own a marketing agency now. I legitimately do. But I think what it was is in my work, and even when I was smoking weed, especially when I was smoking weed, I was still working 80 hours a week. I wasn't doing anything but work and trying to make it happen because I was making so little money. And I was constantly frustrated with myself that it seemed like my business was just stalling. I gained personal skills during that time. And I said something about effects on memory. That's definitely true. I did develop programming skills, etc. It's not that my entire life was a black hole for 10 years, etc. But I think that I got so frustrated with the fact that I never seemed to be moving at all in my business. And I I always knew in the back of my mind that, hey, if you're making 20, $30,000 a year, maybe you shouldn't be smoking weed. I think that was my reasoning. We'll figure out the conversion rate for that one or whatever. But like, I felt an obligation to my wife. I didn't have any children at the time, but I felt an obligation to the people around me, to my clients, and I thought I was serving my clients well. But I was working 80 hours a week. I have very little capacity, and that's what I think about constantly today. Do I need to hire another developer? Do I need another salesperson, et cetera, et cetera? Do I have the capacity to take on another client at the 10, 15 K retainer level that I want, et cetera? At the time when it was just me smoking weed all day, I was sitting at a computer. I was in front. I was showing up for work 80 hours a week. But showing up for work means nothing whenever you are paid based on the projects that you close and that you fulfill. So um, it occurred to me to try the experiment, to say, hey, let's stop. Let's cut it out. Let's see what happens. I wandered barefoot in the icy mountains near my home in Boulder, Colorado. So you can just walk, at least where I used to live. You do a 10-minute walk and you're at the foot of a mountain. You do a 2-hour jog and you're at the top of an icy mountain. And I exposed myself to that suffering. And I said, I can do whatever I want. I'm way better than I think I am. And I don't need pleasure because I can't feel my feet anymore. I don't need pleasure. I need power. I need money. I need the capability that matches the level of ambition that I hold in my heart, right? I needed to become the person that I thought I would be. And while I was smoking weed, and I think this is extremely common with weed, by the way, my God, you've got me passionate here. There's this idea of ambition. And the average weed smoker that I encounter has a level of ambition and desire and drive and fantasy, which is beautiful, a beautiful fantasy of who they could be, but they never get there for years, floundering and sitting and watching Netflix and whatever, right? Uh, and yeah, I had one of those moments, and it took me months to stop wanting weed. It took me
Yeah.
weeks to notice any difference whatsoever in my cognition, my ability, the need to sleep, my the rapidity at which I could work, etc. That I think was probably the hardest part because there was never an obvious. We're used to with computers, with video games, with drugs. You get instant feedback. You take that hit, you feel the rush. That's instantaneous. If I'm withdrawing over the course of 3 months to get into a normal brain state, I don't even know if it's working. It was, in that sense, it was more like a diet plan or something. It was like,
Yeah.
have faith that if you stop eating candy every night, in 3 months, you're going to see a couple bumps on your abs or whatever. And that tenacity, I think that's how I got trapped in it for 10 years, right? I didn't have that tenacity. I didn't have the faith that it was really worthwhile. And there's so many people out there to tell you that this is fine and who cares. And you're better than everybody else because everyone else drinks every day. By the way, I quit. I don't drink every day. I still don't like alcohol. uh, so
Yeah.
yeah.
And one of the things you said, right, was that we have this fantasy, we have this vision as weed smokers that we could be all of this, we could feel this potential, but we're just getting stoned and just kind of putting that our own brakes on, driving around with a handbrake on almost, right? Just like not getting anywhere, not getting fast enough. We're just super stoned all the time and we're still working and having all these justifications. And like you said, you did that for like 10 years. I mean, do you have any regrets when you look back and think, fuck, I wish I'd have stopped 10 years ago? Do you ever think anything like that? Have any regrets at all?
Of course, I of course and of course not, because I think you have to post hoc justify whatever you've done in life, just from like some kind of weird self help angle, right? Like, no, objectively, it was worse to get to where I want to go. Even then, even with my ambitions 10 years ago, what I wanted to be doing, etc. Now, I've had many wonderful things and blessings, and I achieved things that I'm proud of. I found a wonderful wife. Um, I guess I wasn't smoking weed when we had kids for the first time, but I did. I have a wonderful relationship. I live in the place I want to live. I have my career, but the career was probably the biggest issue that was a gap between my fantasy and my dreams and my ambitions and where I wanted to be. And quitting weed wasn't, it didn't just get me to where I wanted to be overnight. I'm still not satisfied. Of course, I'm not satisfied, right? Nobody should be satisfied. And even Elon Musk, I hope, or whatever. Oh no, hold on. Oh, I'm thinking of Jack Ma. I'm thinking of Jack Ma. I hope even the billionaires and lunatics out there are still achieving and still desiring new things. I think that's the nature of life itself. It's certainly the nature of chasing after addictions and drugs and things like this. It directs one's ambition towards rapidly achievable goals that are ultimately ephemeral and then fade away. It's not that dissimilar from achieving wealth or something like that, right? I'm sure Elon still needs his 15th mansion or something. Just stick with Elon because everyone can bully him and nobody cares. That said, there was so much of a gap for so long And it was traumatic. It was sad. It destroyed my sense of confidence. Now I have a healthy, robust ego that my staff have to deal with, like everybody else who's in employment, right? You know that your boss has to have a pretty positive view of themselves. And what I posit to you is that's an association. That's a positive association. Believing in yourself and then going out and doing the thing that is highly risky, really tough, takes a lot of time, a lot of money. But I was constantly in this paralyzed state of, well, I'm some weak, vulnerable, stupid little person. But I'm going to do great things one day. I think I don't remember when I quit, but I was in my mid 20s, like 24, 25. You're an adult at 20, 24, 25. It's not and it breaks my heart because I know somebody will hear this who's in their 40s smoking weed with that same disconnect between ambition and reality. But the reality is, whether it's easier to hear it over the internet, perhaps. It's not, what am I going to be when I grow up in your 30s and 40s? You're grown up. You're grown up. And that time, that potential that you have when you're a teenager and you're playing around and you're having hedonistic experiences or whatever, there's a window, and that it has to pass. It has to pass. And it has passed, even if you don't notice it, even if you trap yourself in these cycles of addiction, because your ability to learn radically decreases over time. Your energy level decreases. One's natural ambition is going to be dampened and dampened and dampened. Again, from this business perspective, I apologize if I'm losing everybody with my insane capitalist monocle man outlook on this. But one of the main reasons that Silicon Valley prefers under 30-year-olds, they prefer 20-year-old founders to give them millions of dollars. Think about how nuts that is. A 20-year-old with millions of dollars of budget. The reason they prefer that is because they're so, and they're going to work 80 hours a week, and they're going to be deeply intense. Is it wise? I don't personally think so. 40-year-olds are much more successful as entrepreneurs, but things are lost in these different life phases. And if you're just trudging through, I do feel like you can lose a decade. And weed is usually viewed as whatever, I smoke weed after I get off work or something like this. I think for many people, perhaps it is fine. I hesitate to even say the stuff about like, hey, after your 20s, something is lost after your 30s. I think these are really hard things to hear. And if I were talking to somebody personally, as I sometimes do, I'd only relay my own experience. But that's part of it. That's my observation, is it can absolutely eat away an entire decade while you are sleeping on the job. You don't even notice.
Yeah. Yeah, just going through life like a zombie, right? Just in that kind of zombie state, just going through life.
It's heartbreaking. And weed specifically, that's really my only experience. I never went into the harder stuff, and thank God for that, I guess. But the free pass is very dangerous. But society tolerates weed, at least in Boulder, Colorado, addiction. I'm not sure if that's right.
And I mean, for you, Jeremy, as an entrepreneur and as a successful entrepreneur, how do you find managing the stress now? Of course, you have stress. You have employees and a team and stuff that goes right, stuff that goes wrong, stuff when shit hits the fan. I mean, how do you manage all of the stress and emotions now when you don't smoke weed?
The level of volatility. So yes, I think oftentimes people think, well, weed calms me down, and that's true. Or pretty much any drug of choice is going to calm you down, right? In the moment, it calms you down. After the fact, you're a mess. After the fact, you're a mess. And with weed's long half-life in the body or whatever, you don't really notice that. There's not a clear up and down phase. So I am infinitely smoother sailing. This reminds me of something. When I've always been very interested in psychology, and I have a whole psychology based business, right? But I remember I read an old book. I love these old psychoanalytic books and all this nonsense, just crazy old like 1910 little book about how this guy figured out that if you give bipolar people lithium, they're even keel. And it was a layperson book. It was not for psychologists. This was like maybe the guy who discovered lithium, maybe it was some popularizer of it. And he was saying that, Abraham Lincoln's bipolar, Winston Churchill's bipolar, all these amazing, great people throughout history, every great artist, Picasso, blah, 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 blah. Everybody that you've ever loved is bipolar in history. I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's quite fair, but whatever. Right. And then he talks about his own patients. He says these bipolar people have these incredible creative moments and they have power and ambition. And during the manic phase, they achieve so much more than the average person would ever achieve in their lifetime. But during the depressive phase, they, I guess we can talk about this, but they have suicidality, they have apathy, they have the inability to accomplish anything. And he was saying that when his patients took lithium, they were actually better off the entire time. And I remember reading that when I was smoking weed, hyper ambitious, and probably with some manic depressive phases myself, and thinking this guy's an idiot. It's clearly these highs of mania that drive people towards this creative genius, because if everyone you've ever loved is bipolar, well, then obviously that's the common thread that makes them great. All bipolar people must be great. So I'm going to sound like the guy in that book. The smooth, steady, even keel of not being addicted to drugs allows you to respond to stresses. Within the past month, I took on and the numbers are relative. I think that some of the listeners, they might sound big. To me, they're a little bit embarrassing now, but hopefully they're always embarrassing. I took on a project for something like 30, 50K. What was it quoted at? I think it was quoted at 40K. My team worked on it for a quarter, a little more than that. I won't charge overruns. I also shouldn't be doing software projects like that, is what I learned. I lost $22,000 on it. I didn't make any money. The client refused to pay me for the work done by the end of it, because, of course, that kind of thing happens. And the net outcome of this entire big, beautiful project, which at some point I was obviously really pumped about, was I just lose $22,000. I made a fun little hobby for my staff for a quarter. Now, that could sting. That could tear me apart. It could make me feel like I'm a complete idiot. It is what it is. I did not respond to it. I recall even the slightest. I remember a client stiffing me for $500 one time, just tearing me apart. Why doesn't this person like me? And this whole victim mentality. The reality is, I didn't care because I'd already moved on and done the next 5, 10 things. There's never been a time where sometimes payroll gets a little tight. There's never been a time that I've had to delay payments or miss payroll or anything like that. I've been carrying on. And if anything, I've reframed it to say, well, isn't that cool that I can make such a stupid decision? Because it is my fault, by the way, even if the guy stiffed me. I can make such a stupid decision to work with some guy who's going to stiff me and put me out $21,000. And I can still carry on. And in fact, I'm hiring and I'm growing and things are better. I can't talk to other people and I can't do a true comparison within myself, right? There's no parallel reality that I have access to where I'm also smoking weed and I lose $21,000 to compare. But the stress tolerance that I see of the people who chronically smoke weed is abysmal. It's horrid. And, it pains me to see people in that state because I've been there. And then two, what are you going to say? Like, hey, if you just stop doing this thing that you like for the next 3 months, I bet you would really be a lot smoother through life's disasters and challenges and stuff. It's a tough prescription to hear. And I hope that the people who listen to your podcast and I hope they consume this information enough, get a little repetition, you start saying, oh my God, maybe the guy who wrote the bipolar book is right. maybe you really can be creative and achieve more without crashing and laying in bed for an entire week after your great achievement, which maybe is not even that great to begin with. Because the reality is there's a lot more bipolar people that are not famous.
Yeah, yeah.
Ugh.
And I mean, for you, Jeremy, what advice would you give to the version of you that was still smoking, or the version of someone else who's out there who's still smoking? What would you say to that person?
What I do say, because I'm always talking, if I'm talking to a real person, I say, for me, the danger was insidiousness. I didn't realize what I was losing. And it took me 6 months to not want to smoke weed again. And what that means is for 6 months, I had some little bit of weed circulating around in there saying, hey, that'd be cool. That'd be cool. That's a really long time. I said, and I think the other thing I said is it took me about 2 weeks to feel like I'd gotten something back, like I'd reclaimed some territory over the addiction for myself. So I kind of prep those expectations, and I say that's what happened to me. Your mileage may vary. I think to the anonymous person out there on the internet, I strongly urge you to reconsider marijuana. I really don't think that it's not nearly so benign as people make it out to be. The arguments that I heard when I was younger was, well, alcohol kills brain cells. Alcohol leads to domestic violence. Alcohol causes car accidents. All these things are true. Absolutely. Don't start drinking alcohol. It's fundamentally a logical fallacy to say that, well, there are other drugs that are also bad, and society doesn't frown on those drugs. That's fine. I don't care about society. I care about you, dear listener, and your own life. You want as few dependencies as you can possibly muster if you want to live to your potential. And I know everybody has some deep seated sense of purpose and the desire to achieve something. Mine nowadays is a lot of dollars and cents. There's also I have a big idealistic mission, right? With one of my businesses. And I, even in my normal day-to-day job, I feel like I'm achieving that purpose. That's fine. I'm not suggesting that you need to start a business or anyone needs to start a business or do anything like that. That's my own thing. That's the game that I want to play. And I've always wanted to play it. But I haven't. I was half in and half out. And it just I really, really hope that people don't continue to make excuses. I hope that for some of us who do like to process stuff intellectually, rationally, you can hear this and you can think, okay, really, what are the arguments? What are the arguments for indulging in this kind of pleasure?
Yeah,
Right? There's all kinds of pleasures in the world. Should I really be trading my future for the present? And where else am I doing this? Am I racking on massive credit card debt? Would I consider racking on massive credit card debt to be a great idea? Should I be borrowing from future Jeremy all the way over here to have just a smidgen more excitement in my life right now?
yeah.
And
And really consider that, and for people to really follow their dreams and think about the future, right? And think about the future. And for you, Jeremy, in the here and now, you say you live in Colorado where everyone's, smoking weed and there's weed all around you. Do you ever feel triggered, or like you might relapse, or you might go back to smoking? How do you feel about that side of things, being around it all the time?
yeah, so in my social group, I'm very much online. My whole team is remote. I still work a lot, but I'm very fulfilled and I have a family. Um, I do have a very close friend who's near me who smokes weed. He's much older guy, and I actually think that he's fine. I'm not necessarily asserting that he has an addiction. I don't think he does. I think he makes his own decisions. And that's what he wants. I think he's not. There's not this gulf between what he wants and what he's doing. So no, I don't have any cravings. Hallelujah. I'll say I smoked cigars for a long time. Cigars are a lot closer to now. I'll still indulge in a cigar in certain contexts. It's not like a daily thing, so I feel like I'm in control there. Um, But no, I don't have cravings. I don't really have a social circle that smokes weed. Now, most of my friends are other business owners. And I have a marketing agency. So most of my clients are other business owners or, in like a vice president level of a bigger company. And the people that I hang out with now are all mainly just parents. I guess some of them probably smoke weed, but that's not really something you talk about in the context of like, let's go to the park and let's see if we can get them to like go down the slide together as opposed to just stand there and stare at each other like lunatics.
Yeah,
So
yes.
I'm outside of it now largely.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you did mention a few of the healthy things you do in terms of meditation and, hot and cold exposure with saunas and ice baths. Just wondered if you could talk about some of the more positive habits you now have in your life, like meditation or ice baths or saunas or any of the other things you do in your life.
I love that question, Luke, because I do think people with addiction tendencies, whatever that means, are prone to, they have an itch, right? You have some kind of itch to get outside of yourself. And yourself really is genuinely very limited, right? There are many great artists. Uh, One of my favorites are the Talking Heads. They talk about this, but the idea of, hey, you were really looking out of a window through your eyes, and your consciousness is far beyond yourself. We're getting woo. We're getting weird. Uh, you you kind of asked for it though, Luke. So we're
Go ahead, go ahead.
okay. So yes, I think that the instinct to be more than yourself and to occasionally dissolve the barriers of I am Jeremy and I'm out for my own self-interest or something like this. I'm not even demonizing self-interest necessarily. My self-interest in the context of business serves other people too. In marketing, I make money by making other people money. Everybody makes money, and it's just a very simplified version of win-win. I make win-win deals with my family, with my friends, with everybody that I meet, in my own self-interest, in my own body. That being said, I think that we always have, especially in drug experiences, you get this hint that there's more than your own body, there's more than other people, and that you're interconnected with the world in an intense, sometimes euphoric manner that is evocative of things like religion, divinity, oneness, etc. That's the mystic experience. I'll just put a nice little tag on that and call it the mystic experience. I've always meditated, um, poorly and rarely, as I think most people who have meditated would say, poorly and rarely, occasionally. I've loved binaural beats. If you make the time and you take that out, it's amazing that you listen to one of these goofy YouTube tracks where it's like listen to the 777 frequency and experience infinite. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah,
I've
I
listened to
think those are
binaural beats.
hilarious.
Yeah,
Right. And at the same time, though, binaural beats are a legitimate and powerful way to induce an altered state of consciousness. I think it can scratch that itch somewhat. The alpha frequency seems to be ideal for kind of that gateway. Another one is HemiSync or HoloSync, whatever the brand name is. The Monroe guy, I forget his full name, but the Monroe Institute, he discovered that could have out of body experiences, and then he did this with he made a program using binaural beats. Nowadays, I'm not even sure if they still sell it, but it's a very common item on the open seas of the internet. It's really easy to find the HemiSync software out there. And again, it's just a binaural beat technology. One of the things, and I'm going into that because that's accessible to anyone with a set of headphones. I Since we're in the mystic track, I manifested and set the goal for getting a sauna in my own house for a very long time. Right. So that's not as accessible. I'm aware of that. Most people do not have a sauna readily available. You can also get a very altered state using a sauna. Absolutely. Maybe even at the gym, even though I'm not sure if that's a good idea, going into an altered state at the gym. But exposing your body to extreme situations, uh, getting very cold, very hot, very exhausted. Uh, Oftentimes, euphoric dancing. One of the more popular things here in Boulder I've never done this. I'm a bit too stiff, at least now. I think if I was single, maybe I wouldn't be, but who knows? There's such a thing as ecstatic dancing. Ecstatic dancing. Do you know what I'm talking about, Luke?
No, tell
Have
me,
you ever
tell
heard of
me.
this? I'm not entirely sure. Now, I know some people who do this, but there's like 10 dance collectives in Boulder where people just go like the Sufis and spin around and do crazy, goofy stuff to exhaust themselves and get into altered states of consciousness. Um, my point is, this is always accessible. It's always accessible. You don't necessarily need intense discipline. That was one of the things that really spooked me about quitting drugs and losing access to my perception of the greater world, whether or not we're going to call that God or whatever. But I would occasionally have these experiences of I'm connected with the world. The world is good. There's nothing but infinite grace that has allowed me to exist at all because I should absolutely be dead. I have flirted with being dead so many times. There's no reason I should have anything good in my life. But here I am. I have this, I have that, even the smallest things, just taking stock and being grateful. Those moments get you through some of the darkest times. For some people, that's religion. For me, it was the direct connection with the world. I'll avoid talking about God or something weird. I was afraid about losing that when I quit drugs. And I thought the only path there was by meditating for an hour a day or whatever, following some Andrew Huberman protocol. Love Andrew Huberman, by the way. Right. But I thought that I was going to have to do some hyper disciplined, really tough thing. I mentioned this already. I can get that same experience running barefoot in the freezing cold snow up to the top of a mountain. Now, you may or may not have a mountain, but I guarantee you could run and exhaust yourself until you lose your sense of identity. And when you're driven to reach outside of yourself, that's one way to do it. So I get, in conclusion, I think that it's always accessible. I think it is vitally, vitally important. And I'm not even getting into like Joe Dispenza, manifest your reality kind of stuff, even though maybe that's an important element too. I've met a lot of people who swear by that kind of thing. So
Yeah, but like you say, some really amazing things that you do to help you stay on track in terms of, manifesting and staying focused, which is really, really important. It's good to have that goal and the focus and the direction you're heading in is really, really important in life and in recovery. To have that direction is just absolutely critical. And also to kind of have support. And I know that you have your own marketplace, and I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your marketplace that you've set up and how it works.
right. So 5, 6 years ago, would I still been smoking weed? Maybe, but I always have business ideas, right? I'm going to change the world through business A, B, C, D. I stand by that. I think that I'm changing the world right now through my marketing agency. I promote people who have good products and services, people that I personally endorse that I think should get more exposure and get out there in the world. I have a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment in doing that. That said, there's nothing so close to my heart as my business Atlas Talk. Now, forgive me. The name Atlas Talk, not my best name. What is it? Atlas is holding the world. It's heavy. It's kind of heavy. He wants to just put it down, take a break, chill out for a little bit. Right. So that was my premise there. Maybe I'll hopefully change the name into something that actually tells people what it is. For example, I love BetterHelp. BetterHelp tells you what it is. It's a better form of therapy. Now, Atlas Talk is not therapy. It is peer counselors. And if you go to atlastalk.com, I'm tempted to do it myself because I'm always in the midst of technical challenges with it. But if you go to atlastalk.com, there are hundreds of people right now who are offering their services for anywhere between $5 an hour and 100. Really, people average out around 15. So my goal, my dream with Atlas Talk, the reason that's so close to my heart is I think that there are a lot of people who wouldn't consider therapy. They consider it too extreme. In the US, there's a lot of odd laws that I don't fully understand that make me somewhat hesitant of therapy. So things like, we won't get into weird gun control and things like that, right? That's a totally different thing. But a lot of people worry about that. I think that if disproportionately affects young men who are worried that they won't be able to own a gun if they get diagnosed with mental illness. And, obviously in America, there's a lot of places where gun culture is significant. You go out to the range and shoot with your buddies. There's also a lot of people who don't want to be stigmatized with a diagnosis. I don't know if that's good or bad to get diagnosis. I think it helps some people, but my point is I want to make a path around common objections to therapy by providing something that's not quite therapy. It's talking to somebody who's been there. And in the case of addiction, I think this is the most direct and simple. It's I was using fentanyl. I was homeless and scoring crack wherever I could. I was, somebody like me with a somewhat more benign drug addiction. I smoked weed for 10 years. And I want to talk to you about it and help you get to where you want to go for like $20 an hour. Aside from that, the premise is very similar to BetterHelp, which is we have an app. You find the person that you want. In this case, you find the person you want. BetterHelp, I think, matches you with somebody that they think you want. You shop for the right person for you. You say, hey, can I talk to this person? You schedule time and then you chat over the phone. That's the whole premise. And the value in my mind is greater diversity of listings. So we can actually find people who have been there. And addiction is a very common one, but it's also stuff like divorce, right? Like if you get a divorce, I would love somebody who's not just on a high horse telling me how I ruined my relationship. Not that a therapist would do that, but I would love to hear from somebody who's been there and got over it. Like, what were the steps you took? Maybe they're not the best steps. Maybe they're not the universal steps, but this is a real person who's gone through this real problem, and then they did X, Y, Z. So we have a great diversity of listings. We're lowering the cost, which I think matters a lot for accessibility, for getting people to actually take the plunge and say, right, I am willing to talk about my personal problems. And in my mind, the reason that this is such a passion project for me, and this is maybe foolish, but I love meditating on my own demise. Marcus Aurelius style, right? What's going to happen when I'm getting laid down, they're carving a little tombstone. What does the world look like? And I fantasize. My ambition is so broad that I want the world to just 5% more of the time to be able to look at other people as if they're people. I love my staff most of the time with my staff. And I honestly, I think about them first in every decision that I make. I think about them when we take on new work. I think about them every day about how happy they are with the work. I always am trying to treat them, lovingly, etc. But they are also tools. They are tools to help me in the organization. I'm a tool for the organization in a sense as well to accomplish a broader goal. I love my clients, but to my clients, I'm also a tool. And occasionally I'm a person. Occasionally. The person in front of you at the checkout line is not even a tool, they're an obstacle. The person who, cuts you off in traffic and flips the bird or whatever, this person is an obstacle and a barrier to getting what you want. But they're also a person, and their mom's in the hospital for the third time, dying of cancer, right? And we never know the full scenario of anybody else's life. And I don't want to pretend to. And I'm not saying that everyone is benign. There's true evil. There's true horrible stuff. I've seen some of it. That said, people are people. And just some of the time, just occasionally, I would love for people to be able to reflect and say, we're common humanity. We all have problems. We all have suffering. We're all immature. We all act out. And I can accept that. I think that Alice Talk progresses that goal. That's the insane version of that's a pretty weird business goal. But that's my business goal with that project, is I think that if you participate and you say, hey, I'm going to bare my soul to just some random schmo, some random guy who is out there on the internet and he thinks he can help me, but he's not qualified. He's just another guy just like me. Or alternatively, if you are schmo and you're out there and you're saying, hey, I want to talk to you about your problems, and you can realize that just almost any two people can get together and share that beautiful, heartfelt moment, then what's to stop you from saying the whole world is beautiful and perfect just as it is, and we're all going to get through it, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the amazing things about it is that sense of personal experience, right? A lot of clients I work with, even when it comes to counseling, they're like, I don't just want someone who has like the degree in just reading from a textbook. I want someone who's been there. And they say that, Atlas Talked is so good because it connects people who have been there. You can find people who have been through a divorce, who have smoked crack, who have smoked weed, like whatever the case may be. You can find people who have, as I say, walked a mile in your shoes and connect with them and get to know them more. So we're going to put all the links and everything down in the description, so people can go and check it out. Anything, Jeremy, you want to sign out on as we come to an end?
Well, I really appreciate what you're doing, Luke. And I'm a little embarrassed, a little awkward talking about these topics because I don't commonly do it. I think it's great that you're pulling out this common experience of addiction from the world writ large and putting it out where people can see it and hopefully learn without having to pay that cost yourself. Just to
Yeah,
be able to, anyone who's here and listening to this, probably a good reason that you are. And there is help. There is a brighter future. People do achieve what they want. And it's simply a matter of having the humility to accept that sometimes you make a mistake.
yeah, yeah. And that's okay. And we can always grow and move on and move forward. But no, that's awesome. Thank you very much, Jeremy, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Luke.